the meeting order. You ready, Adam? Perfect. Calling the Wednesday, January 16, 2019 meeting of the Montpelier-Roxbury Board of School Directors to order at 6:38 p.m. for Apple time. So first item is public comment. I don't see any members of the public. I did just get a text in from our biggest fan, Nathan.
Me too. Me too. Oh.
Yes.
That
which he asked me to read, so I will do so. Per Nathan Suter, thank you for serving our students and our community. As you vote on the budget tonight, please ask, are we doing what is needed to serve all of our children well? If my child were in need of more support, would I be satisfied with what this budget does? Yours truly, Nathan. Okay, so next, wow, we just blocked 15 minutes. So consent agenda. I do want to just do a quick schedule order. We were thinking about going into moving executive session. I think we're going to keep it where it is for a few reasons. One, Grant and Andrew are here, and we want to be respectful of their time. And also, Hope and Emma are here and want to be respectful of their time, especially since they're in the midst of midterms and they want to get to
studying. We believe
yes.
in
Adam, you can suffer.
Yeah. So we'll keep the schedule as is, which moves us to the consent agenda.
Can I pull the Nutrition Act?
Yes, you may pull the Nutrition Act.
Move we approve the consent agenda consisting of the minutes, the warrants, and the budget policy report. Is that what you need?
Yes.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? There's a typo in the agenda. It's not a big one, but we go back in time. So learning focus.
Policy.
Can we, the question about the...
Oh, sorry, I totally forgot.
So my question has to do with, under guidelines for child nutrition programs, first page C, it says, information for free and reduced lunch is available on our website. Great. Is it available anywhere else?
It's also, I believe, but I'd have to check with Jim, sent home to parents in the beginning of the school year.
You get it in your
That's
packet.
what I thought, and I was just worried if this is the only place.
No, I believe it's there too. It's in the beginning
Okay,
of
that
year
was
two.
my only question.
I actually had a question too. Libby, you had pointed out under the guidelines for physical activity that the district has considerable room to grow concerning a campaign to our community regarding physical fitness. Do you have any examples or maybe elaborate a little bit on what
We just hadn't
considerable...
done anything. So I think I was just thinking that if we haven't, in my 7 months here, we haven't had any effort to address that letter in any way that I know of.
Sure.
So that's why I think there's considerable room
Okay,
to grow. Yeah, just because we haven't made any effort thus far.
I had a question also. At the end, your conclusion is that we are nearing compliance?
Sorry, keep going.
Well, I was wanting, when we have a report that says, I mean, this essentially says we're not in compliance. Nearing is a nice way of putting it, but we're not in compliance. And so if you can add, what
we're gonna
needs
do.
to be done to bring us into compliance.
I can most definitely do that. That's a really good suggestion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
I have another question, not specifically about that, but about the superintendent's report. She states at the beginning that we might have questions that she might answer somewhere else, but it's nowhere on the agenda, so I wondered if there was a place for questions about her report.
What I wrote, can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
What my thinking was, because we had such a full agenda with the first reading of a policy and the budget and the lead,
To send them to you?
to ask away, and I'll write them down, and
Right,
then
that's
get
what
back
I-
to you
Yeah.
at a later board, at the next board meeting. That's what my
That's-
intent was, if
That's
that's
the way
fine
I
with you.
interpreted it.
Huh?
Yes, that's the way I interpreted
Yeah,
it.
that
But I
was-
wondered if you were gonna do it here or you wanted them sent.
You can send them to me, or you can give them to me here if you have them listed.
Go ahead.
Are we there on the agenda?
Well,
I
what have you,
don't-
what are you
It's
doing
not
about
on
the
the
Nutrition
agenda.
Act?
I think
didn't
that
mean
was-
to
Oh, we
waylay you.
forgot to put it on the agenda.
I think that was your point, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to put that on the agenda. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
But before we go there, what's happened to the Federal Child Nutrition Act and Wellness Funds? I mean, do we have to do anything more?
We have
on
to
that?
accept that report.
We have to accept it,
That's
yeah.
what I'm saying, before we go on to something
Yeah,
else.
so is there further discussion on the Federal Wellness and Child Act? So, motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Do you want to do the superintendent's
Yeah,
report
it's,
now?
do you have a problem with it not being on the agenda?
We can also have people send questions that I can answer next board meeting, that's absolutely fine with me too. It's just a lot of information, and I recognize that.
Okay, I just wondered what we were doing.
Are you okay with that, Tina? 'Cause
Sure.
if we had it on the agenda, I'd be more comfortable, but we're kind of adding it to the stream.
Yeah.
Well, you send questions and we'll address it in a second. February?
Yeah, the 6th or something
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
Alright, so now, I'm ahead of myself now, catching up. Learning focus, so Hopenema, you ready?
All right, so right now, especially at the high school, it's sort of crunch time. Like, we just got done with summative week, and now we're in retake week and midterms, and it's been nice to see over the past few years students get more and more adjusted to proficiency-based grading, and so now it seems like everyone's sort of much more, like the whole environment just seems much more comfortable with navigating proficiency-based grading, which is always good. And there are also auditions for the spring play, Our Town, and the sports season is sort of in full swing, and state championships are going to come up in the next few weeks. So, yeah. And those were student celebrations, and as for student concerns and needs, we're both leaving early, so we won't have the chance to be here during the actual reading of the equity policy, but we do want to address it and support it wholly, and sort of just appreciate how it thinks about student experiences and perspectives from a really holistic standpoint, and is sort of just a great commitment that we're making as a community to sort of strengthening inclusivity in our classrooms and supporting all of our students, and really aligns with our vision and our mission as a board. Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about the meeting that members of the Gay Straight Alliance, Gender and Sexuality Alliance, and the Racial Justice Alliance, and other students who formed the Equity Policy Committee at MHS, and how that meeting went. And I know that it was insightful to learn more about the exact workings of policy, and also what the purpose of this policy, and how our needs and desires as students can be met by the policy. And I know that we added some language in regards, and our edits are in red here, and we added some language in regards to socioeconomic status so that we can support students and address income inequality in our district, and also wanted to emphasize marginalized students and marginalized populations, and by bringing students who suffer the most up, we're helping out all students. Yeah, and we also are interested in perhaps conducting a survey of the middle school and high school students to sort of gauge the environments in each of them, to get hard data and better address student needs. And I don't know if that's explicitly mentioned in the policy, but that is definitely a good next step so that we can best accomplish the goals aligned in the policy.
I don't know how it happened, but that pretty much summed up like everything I wanted to say. But I mean, there's also a piece about professional development, which I know is something that Hope and I have discussed several times at these meetings. And so just stressing that and how that is a way to counteract and prevent bias. Also, Hope is pointing to restorative practices, which we've been working with Lissa Noss on the restorative justice work, and we think that that's also an important piece of equity in school systems. So, do you want to speak more on that?
Sure. I know that Lissa and some other faculty members and even our principal as well, Mike McCraith, are all interested in correctly implementing restorative justice practices in the school district, and I know that the middle school is already working on that, and so students will be coming into the high school with experience. And with restorative justice practices, you always have to be really cognizant of the fact that if they are implemented incorrectly, the student body can become really resistant to them. So we're kind of carefully planning this out and working with lots of different students and lots of different faculty members to sort of plan our next steps.
Which will, it's gonna be a long process, so it's,
It's good.
That's it.
Questions?
I like it.
I have one quick question on grading. From the student's perspective, what is the difference between the old grading system and proficiency? Like, does it feel like there's a real difference, and is it something that's understood, or has a 4 become an A?
Well, Hope's never had the
That's
old.
true. I have never
And
known.
Emma only had it for 1 year.
Yeah.
So.
Time flies.
Yeah.
I can speak to this like a little bit, but like Michelle said, I've only had it for the old grading system for a year. I think it's proficiency-based grading has like allowed me to kind of like spend more time learning and less time cramming and memorizing for like that one big test that counts for 70% of my grade. But then, I think there is still some confusion though, but I think that'll
Dissipate.
Yeah.
I have a question on that too. This is a question that I received from a community member who's younger, who's thinking about having kids and raising kids in this community and asking about public schools. And the question was, are Montpelier students finding it difficult when applying to colleges with proficiency-based scores?
Yeah, but
As someone who was up all night last night applying to college.
Don't say that.
And
Not the
where
right
are
thing
you
to
going
say
to
in
college?
public, Michelle.
I have a daughter who's a senior, like I'm at Adam, and yesterday was a deadline, so. Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for do you want to answer that, Emma, since you've had experience there, or no?
No, I think you're gonna probably say
Okay.
what I'm thinking.
So, one of the things that we have done extensively, we as educational leaders have talked with colleges and universities about that exact thing. And if you think about the variation of schools that college and universities get transcripts from, it's all over the place. There is no one common transcript.
Yeah.
In fact, there's no one common transcript between us and Burlington High School, or they'll
Right.
look completely different. So they take academic transcripts and the package that a student sends, and they make the best of it in multiple ways. And so it really doesn't influence college admissions at all.
I've been to like 20 college information sessions in the past 3
Yeah.
years, and at every single one, the person makes a point, the college admissions rep makes a point of saying, you know, we get a quarter of our students are international. You think their transcripts have a 4-point scale? You know, in the U.S. there are schools that have an 11-point scale and a 7-point scale.
Or no scale at all.
Or
Yeah.
right, they get narratives
Right,
from
exactly.
like Waldorf
Yeah.
schools and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it does not matter.
Well, after all, an A in one place isn't necessarily an A in the other, so even when we had A, B's, and C's, it wasn't the same.
Well, even within a school too, because some classes are weighted, and so an A in one class is more than an A in another. Great, well, thank you. Any other questions?
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you.
Have a good return.
Not
Thank
that you
you.
need it.
Thank you. Oh, Emma's already all accepted.
I know, I didn't know if I wanted to say that.
She's going to Columbia. They didn't mind.
Yeah. Actually, I used you as an example with this person.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Exciting.
Their dream school.
Huh?
Their dream school.
So next up we have lead results and Andrew.
Right. So, it's a little hard copy of the presentation. What I like the staple location. Well, it was a copying mistake, and I figured why recopy. So, we want to just kind of go through where we are, how we got there, and talk a little bit about where we think we might want to go. At the behest of a parent, I'm going to stand if that's okay.
Yes.
I was called when I first got on the job. I was asked about lead testing. I was a parent who had asked previous administration about it, and we said, sure, we'd be happy to do that. We are one of 6 districts outside of the pilot program that everyone's probably heard so much about, and that was sort of the impetus for the request. We are, like I say, we're one of 6 school districts that have voluntarily done some widespread testing. What we did was, what we've been asked to do by the department, we've done this in conjunction with the Department of Health. Not the same level that the pilot program was, but we called with questions. What are we doing here? What should we do? So to give you a little background, so we tested all the fixtures that were commonly known to be used for drinking or cooking. We did not test every fixture in the district. Again, a science classroom sink in a high school is not going to be used for drinking water typically. So we went through the different schools, elementary schools, seeing separating classrooms, drinking fountains, other sort of nurse's office, places like that. Again, we have not tested all faucets, not required. We met with Michelle Thompson. Libby and I recently met with Michelle Thompson. She is sort of she's a industrial hygienicist for the state. She's sort of the point person on this lead testing. She's done it in conjunction with a lot of different people, but she's the point person for this, for the lead testing. And what we wanted to do was do our sampling, meet with Michelle, get an understanding of what we were looking at, talk a little bit about what our options were moving forward, and then make this presentation to you. So this is where we are. We will continue to work with the Vermont Department of Health. One of the things that the pilot program did not do a great job of, not that it was its intent, is it didn't really talk a lot about what schools did after they got this information. There was a lot of information about what schools immediately did, but not how they crafted policies moving forward. The state of Vermont, I suspect that we will see something from the state of Vermont that will take recommendations and make them, they will legislate them. The governor has made public comments about testing schools. Again, what that looks like afterwards, I don't think we know quite yet. And this is an ongoing process. As we've gone through this and we've talked about the fact that we've been doing some testing, I've gotten phone calls from folks saying, hey, I got a sink in my room, can you come test it? So that's kind of where we are right now. Talk a little bit about the process with regards to the actual sampling. There are two tests that you do when you're sampling for lead. There's what's called a first draw, which is the water that immediately comes out of the faucet. That's water that's been, it's a faucet that hasn't been used in the last 8 to 18 hours. The second sample that you take is what's called a flush draw, where you turn the water on, let it run for 30 seconds, and test the water coming down the pipe. The pipe, I guess, is the right one. So to give some context of the numbers that we're going to be talking about here, the EPA action level for lead in drinking water is 15 parts per billion. That's what can come from the water system, Montpelier water system. Anything above 15 parts per billion is an action level. They need to do something about that. The FDA has a limit of 5 parts per billion. So if you go get a bottle of water at the grocery store, that can have up to 5 parts per billion. The new Vermont Health Advisory level and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation is 1 part per billion or less. That is, again, that's still a recommendation. It's not legislature yet. Legislative, yes. Most lead poisoning in conversations with Michelle, most lead poisoning in the state of Vermont comes from lead paint. It's not from drinking water. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I misread that. So I was going to say, I thought it came from lead pipes in drinking water, but you're saying most contamination comes from lead.
Yeah, that's the source is lead paint. That all being said, it's universally agreed that no level of lead is safe for inside the body is safe. So, I'm going to go through some of these numbers. We will be posting the full results of the actual sort of ledger of the results on the web page. That's one of the things that the state has recommended that we do, is share the information. I think that we've been talking about what the right time for that is. We wanted to understand what these numbers meant before we just kind of threw them out there. So at Roxbury, small building, we tested 9 locations. Our first draw test, within that 0 to 1 part per billion, 5 faucets came back clear. At 3 parts per billion, we had 2 faucets on the first draw. At 9, we had 1. And at 10 parts, we had 1. Those were those high numbers, those 4 above, those 4 at 3 and above. Those all came from sink bubblers, little bubblers on the side of the sink. The flush draw for all the faucets down there were below the 1 part per billion, which is great news that there's nothing that we know of down the pipes inside the building. Again, to go back to those bubblers, there was a window that in the 80s where some of these faucets, they had legislated a level of lead, but they hadn't made it, it was still allowed in plumbing fixtures. Bubblers, according to the Department of Health, are notorious for that, having lead residue in there. We have subsequently, for all fixtures after a concern was raised by a parent and some cautionary measures suggested that until we have a chance to talk with Michelle Thompson to really understand the numbers that we should close all the faucets, all fixtures that had any being above 1 part per billion, which we did. That's a relatively new, that happened last week, but it seemed like a good idea and that we should do that until we talk with Michelle. So down at Roxbury, those 4 bubblers that were at a high level we've put signs on them, do not use. Those fixtures, I don't think we have, and again, I am not an expert.
I'm sorry, I'm still not catching up with you. What is a bubbler?
That's what I was wondering.
You know, water fountain. Imagine the water fountain that's in the sink.
Oh,
Yeah.
The silver water fountain with like a
Little knob.
on it.
a drinking
A
fountain,
drinking fountain.
but
yeah.
adjacent to a,
There's 2 bowls.
A
There's a
sink.
regular hand sink, and then there's a little in the same,
Got it.
Think like
Basin.
traditional classroom
Okay.
drinking fountain.
yeah, the old
Yeah.
school ones that.
Okay, I can't picture it, but I understand now.
I just Googled it.
So, those fixtures, unlike some other fixtures that we're waiting on test results for, I don't think we're not even gonna try to get those down to one part. Those fixtures are from the 80s, they're just, we've taken them offline. We'll have to talk about what our next steps are. So this Roxbury. Union, we tested 17 locations. Of those 17 locations, the 0 to 1 part per billion was 10 fixtures. We had 3 at 2 parts per billion. We had 1 at 3, excuse me, my eyesight's terrible, I apologize. We had 3 at 2 parts per billion. We had 1 at 3 parts per billion, 2 at 4, 1 at 5. We also had down there a fixture that came in at 23. We immediately shut that one off. Ironically, that faucet was brand new. In talking with the Department of Health, they say that often happens. What happens is you're working on a fixture, you're jiggling pipes around, you get a high reading. Take it offline, flush it, retest it. We did that with that fixture. The next reading came back at 4 parts per billion. We've continued to run it and flush it. It's actually at the lab now being resampled. So these tests are really difficult, and it's not, when talking with Michelle, the second you start messing with things, your results can start bouncing all over the place.
So where is the actual source of lead? Is it in the, is it in the, the materials in the sink?
In the solder,
We don't have
in
any
lead water
pipes.
lines.
Do we have lead pipes
Yes.
in Union?
Pardon me?
Do we have lead pipes in Union?
I do not know that answer. But it was very typical. If you guys live in an old house,
Yeah.
chances are your water main is connected to your house through a sleeve of lead, straight up lead pipe.
Yeah.
That has a little bit of flexibility as the ground moves. The water lines don't snap. So,
That's a bad thought.
the good news, again, the good news at Union, all of our flush draws came back at the 0 to 1. Except for one that came back at 2. Oh, I should have brought an aerator for you guys to see. But, so,
Well, that means you should run the water before you take a drink.
well, we can talk about that. So again, we had that one anomaly fixture, that new fixture. We immediately took it offline. We flushed it. We tested it. It went right down to the 4 parts. We're retesting it right now. At Union, we, in consultation with Michelle, one of the first things you do is, let's take the aerators off. Those little screens that make your water come out nice and smooth. Well, they're screens, and they trap everything that's been coming through. So the first step we took, and again, there is no X, Y, Z, but before just starting to ripping out plumbing and disturbing lines, and we took the aerators off, we purged the system. We actually are waiting on results at Union for those fixtures right now. So we'll know in a couple days whether just taking the aerators out was our culprit. A lot of these were in the 90 edition, so it may be the fixture, but we'll know that in a couple days, and if good. Questions of Union? And if I'm going too fast, just let me know. Main Street Middle, you'll notice as the schools get older, there's less sort of sources of drinking water. Main Street Middle, we sampled 13 locations. 8 were the 1 point, 8 were 1 or below. We had 3 at 3 parts, 1 at 4 parts, 1 at 7 parts. 4 of those higher above 1 points were in the home ec room, which is historically, as in talking with Richard, says, oh, I replace those aerators all the time because it's low water pressure down there, and the aerators get jumped up often. Again, we took the aerators out. We had because of the sampling requirements, Richard had run some faucets when I came in to resample last week, and so I flushed those out for you too. I'll be back next week. So I'm gonna pull those samples tomorrow. He's gonna do a little flush this afternoon, and I'll be back with these samples tomorrow. Flush draws, 10 were at the 1 or below, 2 were at 2, and 1 was at 3. Again, those 2s and the 3s were in that home ec room.
Wasn't there one drinking fountain that we took offline immediately?
And there was a drinking fountain in the gym that we took off.
Yeah.
That one is a filtered bubbler. We replaced the filter, we're retesting it. We'll talk about the bottle fill stations. And as Libby was correctly pointing out, that 3-part per billion on the first and the flush was an old, just regular wall-mounted, unfiltered water fountain. It's 30 feet down the hall from another water fountain that's filtered that you can see. We just shut the water off to it. High school. High school, we had 14 locations, 10 at 1, 2 at 2, 1 at 3, 1 at 15. The 15, as soon as we got those results, we immediately swapped out that fixture. We're still waiting on the results on that one, the retest on that one. One of the 2s was again a new fixture, a brand new fixture up in the kitchen. Those
Most of
came
the
back.
ones in the high school relatively new compared to
They
the
were
other
put in
buildings?
this summer, but
Yeah,
again,
that's
that
what
sort of
it's-
jostling of pipes. We took the aerators out, we're retesting. We think that in talking with Michelle, these are sort of anomalies that we have to live with. So, we are, again, and the 2 that came in at 2 parts per billion was the nurse's office. And I would,
You didn't bring that one.
I did not bring that one, but it looks like an old dinosaur tooth with, when did they do this? 90 is the addition, so that sink, that's an aerator that's probably close to 30 years old at this point, and so we've pulled that and are having it. So the next steps, as I say, all these fixtures that came in, whether it was a first draw or a flush, we have put do not use signs on them. The sort of next steps, it seems, in talking with Libby, that sort of getting our fixtures to a 1 part per billion is an admirable goal, and I suspect that one that we may be forced to move to as a state, as all public schools head in that direction. We also need to balance how we get there. That's kind of the next tricky part, is how we get there. In talking with Michelle, the idea of taking water out of classrooms where kids in cold and flu season can't wash their hands, teachers can't clean up. In talking with Michelle Thompson, she said that fixtures that are below that 15 parts per billion can still be used for hand washing, can be used for dishwashing, can be used for cleanup. I'm putting that out there. We also realized that in talking with Michelle, that the only way that you're going to, the best control you have, we were talking about, okay, so how do we ensure the public that we are at 1 part per billion? We can't sample every day, right? So do you sample at the end of the year while the faucets are being used? Well, that doesn't help you through the school year. But you can't really sample just before school starts because that water hasn't been used the way it's going to be used. So those are kind of the questions that we're looking to the state to help us set those guidelines, good, bad, or otherwise. We can't be kind of deciding what the best testing policies are, but we will continue to work with them. But that being said, she did acknowledge or said that really the best, most consistent lead-free fixtures are your filtered bottled water stations. That if you change the filters according, she didn't even, I'll look to Libby and she correct me when I say something wrong, that it's not even a matter of test it consistently, but change your filters according to what the manufacturer says and what the machine says. Consistently they come back being your best source for drinking water. So, then we also asked about, so the testing. So if we test a faucet and we do these changes, what's our next? There's no standard of, she said some schools do it yearly, some do it every 10 years. She thought that 3-4 years wasn't a bad sort of range to go through, just to get a sense of where you are within the district. And certainly any fixture above 15 parts, but that's sort of universal. If it's 15 parts per billion, you shut it off. You take it out of service, you replace it, you take your first shot at what you think the appropriate remediation is, do that change, flush it for a week, retest it, and see where you're at. We will continue to work with the Department of Health as we go through this. That sort of aerator test that we did, we're gonna find out very quickly. In the next week or two, I suspect we'll get those results back that it's just in the aerator or if it's in the packings of the valves. We'll know that. Or we'll think we'll know that, but at least we'll have an answer to that. And then also what we'd like to do is take these results and post them, set up a mechanism that the public can go in and look to see where their classrooms tested and if they have any kind of questions. Because it's a scary thing for sure. And it's really, I have a tough time well, it's not good for you. But as the state, we'll let you have one. And then it's sort of, well, one, what's the difference between 1 and 2? And so it'll be great when the state gives a little more guidance to schools.
Good. Well, thank you both for the presentation. Also for doing this. I know we're one of just a couple.
6.
Huh?
6 schools.
Yeah, just a handful of schools that are being proactive in terms of doing this testing and taking action. So it's hugely appreciated. I saw a couple hands. Bridget and then Steve.
How was the cafeteria, like the food prep area?
The
in
food
the
prep
schools?
was, and one of the sinks at UES was 2 parts. On the initial draw was a 2-part. At one of the prep sinks, so we subsequently said, hold using that until we get a retest on that. One of the fixtures at the Main Street Middle School came in at 3, and one of the fixtures at the kettle sink came in at 3. We've got our plumber coming in and replacing that fixture, and then one of the other prep sinks that we had at the high school came in at the 50, and that one we had immediately replaced.
Are there other places other than the bottled water stations where filtering at a sink is an option, like in a food prep kitchen?
At the source, I would imagine so, but I'm not sure how. We can look into that. Sort of a residential one, like you
right,
have.
like we kind of have,
Yeah, we didn't even think about that.
But it's probably going to be, and what we've got is what's coming immediately out of the tap. So fortunately, it's the stuff, there's not like we need to put a filter at the building and clean all the water going through. It's sort of these isolated, and how, we certainly see those for residential use.
Yeah.
How that would set up for a commercial, I'm not 100% sure. But
Michelle was quite clear that washing dishes and things in the sink, based on our readings, she was looking at our readings in the kitchens, and she said washing dishes, that's washing hands, that's all fine to use. She was not concerned with our kitchens for those purposes.
And I think that we asked the specific question of how do we balance this potential water drinking versus the hygiene of the kids. And she was clear. She was clear, thank you. Clear that you're better off putting a sign, telling the kids, telling the teachers, telling the administrators, telling the parents, hey, if you want to be sure, we've got water bottle filling stations, send your kids to school with a bottle, but closing sinks in the classrooms that were within that 1 to 15, the sort of health benefits of one versus the other. Being able to wash a kid's hands is pretty critical.
And she was not worried about that at all. She said, let the kids wash their hands, put a sign up that says this is not for drinking, and then make it part of the routine when teachers do routines like that all the time to say, bring a water bottle, fill it up at the water filling station, but washing hands was fine.
And again, that's something that we'll have to kind of decide, is that just a sign we universally put up at every faucet?
Right,
Or
never
do we
say.
pick and choose? You know, it seems that the picking and choosing, we're never gonna know until we test it and then retest it and do all that. Whereas if you just put a sign up or a plaque up or something pretty permanent that says, you know, drinking water is at the bottle filling stations down at the hallway. Use sinks for hand washing and cleaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Steve?
First of all, thanks to both of you for dedicating the resources to this. I know it's not like being done in your spare time, it's being done in your time, so. thank you.
It's done at 5 o'clock in the morning when
Yeah.
nobody's in the school.
Oh, that's true, okay, so it's your spare time.
I'm an old man, I get up early.
So, it raises a couple questions for me. One is, when you're testing, I've had water tested in wells and such, and there's about 4,000 things you can test for. Lead's just one of them. And there's some that are much more threatening in a sense than lead at these levels anyway. I'm wondering whether that comes along with the test kit, or whether it's something we're gonna do, or whether we feel like because the city has regular testing, the number of contaminants going to enter between the city line and us is very small, so, no.
From this experience, and I would say before we test for anything else, we get Michelle Thompson or someone else from the state to have a frank conversation about what we should be testing for and what we will do with the results before we get the results.
Good. Yeah.
This
So
is,
maybe
this has
we-
been, this is, you know, we're dealing with people's health and it's important and,
Neither of us are lead experts.
and we're not experts and.
Although we're coming there.
Yeah, so we do take it seriously and we are,
And we are on city water, so theoretically.
Yeah.
we're all in
except for
trouble.
Roxbury.
Roxbury's
but-
on well.
Yeah.
But Roxbury has additional testing
They
because
do
they're
have,
on
yeah,
well
they do
water
have
already.
test well testing, yeah, quarterly well testing.
Yeah, it would just be what enters between
Yeah.
the city trunk and us is what we have control over.
Yeah, but again, it's a matter of perception and, we found in notes in former water testing that Roxbury had some water testing done. And there was one of the tests that I found going through old records was one of these faucets that came in at, I think that test had it at 11. And there was a little sticky note that I don't know who it from that said, all tests below actionable level or something to that effect, that we're, you know, we're in good shape, we're below that level. So, but some parents, you know, that's, everybody gets to decide where that is. So it will be easier once it becomes legislated.
The other question it raises is I'm wondering, you know, we know that kids at the ages of school age tend to not eat paint chips too much. But they do breathe lead dust, and I'm wondering if in UES, whether I know we have old windows at UES and Main Street, how much lead mitigation has been done on those windows? Because it's really the window tracing up and down, that's what creates the biggest lead inhalation issues.
Yes, we as part of, there is lead paint in that building. We'll just start there. And as part of our preschool program, we have to test yearly to make sure that there aren't flaking chips, that the paint is solid in base. And we do this down at Roxbury as well. I'm actually trained as an official EMTS, Emergency Management Plan tester. I will tell you straight off, I'm not gonna do those tests. For $200, we will hire somebody from the outside to make this test to say, this is what this person does for a living. I don't really wanna be testing for lead once a year and going, I wonder if that's appropriate or not. I've got the training, so I can talk with this person and understand it, but same thing with the asbestos management plan work. I am certified in asbestos management. I am calling in the experts to come in and do their 6 months.
But our requirements are to encapsulate the lead
Yep.
effectively, but that doesn't work when you have regular friction.
I believe that the jams have been cleaned up, and again, I'm gonna look to, he goes to the inspector that we had, he went and lifted windows and looked in jams and did exactly that. They actually do that, they go and look at the slope side to see if there is dust collected. So,
Thanks for doing all this.
Other questions? Good. Yeah, no, thanks so much, both Andrew and Libby, for getting on this. This is
It's important.
yeah, it's very important for our kids, and we appreciate being proactive on it.
Like I said, we'll post this, we'll get information, Libby's gonna send out another sort of update, I believe, to the parents, let us know where we're at. We will be coming back to you, hopefully with a shorter, presentation in a few weeks on radon testing. We're having the buildings tested for radon. Michelle was very positive about the results so far, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So next up, the budget presentation number 3 or 4 now with Grant? 4.
It was shorter.
Does anybody need a hard
I'm good.
It's
What you sent,
This
right?
is the one we.
What I sent.
Then I'm good.
You can give me a hard copy. I'll
I do, thanks for checking, Andrew.
But I'm not certain I have one.
When you say what you sent, you mean what you sent electronically, not in
Yeah.
the
Oh.
hard copy?
Yes, I'd love one. Please, thank you.
And this is the abbreviated version.
Excellent.
I'm like Andrew, I'm gonna sick. So yeah, since this is the 4th time, we went with a much abbreviated presentation. So unknowns, we're down to just one unknown, and it's not even really completely unknown. I guess technically you could say 2. Equalized pupil count, we did get a number from the AOE, got a couple numbers. I've gotten 2 numbers since we last met. But now, we're pretty sure it's stabilized. It's not considered frozen. There's still some things like, 2 school districts might have reported the same student. So you gotta reconcile that and say, okay, which school district really? Because if a student moved halfway through the first 40 days, so they gotta reconcile some of that. So there might be a little bit of a change still in equalized pupils, but we're pretty close now. The other that you could kind of call an unknown is the residential tax rate and
Yield, right?
and the yield, because those have to be set by the legislature
But they're set.
by law. But what we have is as good as it gets. So really, equalized pupil is the only one, which leads us into the changes. So equalized pupils, I was using 1225.6 because that was last year's number. I got 1194, then I got 1245, and now it's 1232. So from last time to this time, the equalized pupil
1238.
count went up. Is that?
1238.
1238.42. So it's 12, almost 13 kids more than what I had used the last time we met, which is great. It's like between a penny and a half and 2 pennies on the tax rate, so that's awesome. Expenses, I did make some changes. We had somebody who's changed, who moved on the salary schedule, which sometimes happens throughout the year. So if that happened this year, it meant my number next year was off, so I had to change that, a minor change. Health, we had a pretty good decrease because of people changing their coverage options. Career Center tuition unfortunately went the other direction on us. Our 6th semester average came in, and it was 11.65 over a 3-year period, and I had been using 11. So 0.65 times a tech center's tuition is a pretty good chunk of change. So it was almost $10,000 I had to bump up. Roxbury After School, if you remember, in Roxbury they use Bridges, and they have a 21C grant. This year they charged us $10,000 for that program. Next year we got a call, Central Vermont SU called and said, hey, your number next year is going to, instead of 10, it's going to be 25. And so Libby and I had a few conversations with a few people, and we ended up settling at 15, so it's a $5,000 increase. We'll have to see what happens next year, and we may need to reevaluate what's going on there. But so I did plug in that increase there. The good news was the small schools grant is actually $6,300 higher than the last time I showed this to you. And that was a correction I got from the AOE. They told me that our small schools grant was going to be the FY18 amount, and actually it's the FY19 amount. So forever. So that was $6,300 more than I showed you last time. So those are the changes. Those changes resulted in Montpelier's tax rate going down almost 2 cents. And as you would expect, no change in Roxbury because they are already limited by law with 5% increase. So the tax rate calculation, you have that in front of you. I just pointed out a few things like the equalized pupils might change a little bit, but the budget won't. All it's going to do is if the number of pupils changes, then our spending per pupil might change a little, tax rate might change a little, but the budget won't change. Some things just to kind of notice is what I circled there in a little blue circle. If you look at our equalized tax rate, it's actually lower than last year. So, not by much in Montpelier, but a little bit, and a significant amount in Roxbury. So really what's causing the increase, you can really just point to the CLA, the increase in the house values. That alone, if I went back to last year's CLA, the Montpelier tax rate would be 4.7 cents lower than it is, which would mean that we would actually have a lower tax rate. In Roxbury, it's 9.7 cents higher when we factor in the change in CLA. So the 1.703 bottom line, bottom right for Roxbury, that's the same as it was, and it's not going to change pretty much no matter what we do. The Montpelier number was 1.665, it's now 1.646, so it's down 1.9 cents from the last time. I think that's, if I did the math right before, I think it's like a 2.7% increase in tax rate. You know, if you look at last year, this year, it's an increase of about 2.7% for Montpelier. It's an increase of 0.7% for Roxbury.
And the increase in the budget as a whole is 2.6.
Yes. The education spending is up about 4% because we have less local revenues. If you look at our spending per pupil, though, it's only up 2.9% because we have a lot more. We have 13 more kids than we had last year.
So it's 2.9% per pupil, and the increase in tax rates is about
2.8%.
2.8.
2.7 or 2.8, I think.
Yeah, so they're.
And that's 4.5 cents is 2.8 is what you're figuring?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so the tax rate implications, just to update this slide. So Roxbury's the same, 12 for every 100,000. In Montpelier, it's 45 for every 100,000. It was 64, I believe, last time we looked at. And then the footnotes, I just kind of updated a little bit, just pointing out the tax impact would be an actual negative if it wasn't for CLA. That's a big driver. And then once again, the point that 2/3 of folks get an income sensitivity credit, so this is actually kind of a worst case scenario. Discussion points. So what we were hoping to get done today, we have 1 week, I think, for the window for warning by law. You have to do it. What's it?
1 what?
1 week. You have 30 to 40 days prior to town meeting day to warn your articles, for warning to be published. I think the 40 days is the 24th, I think, is the 40 day, and then you have 10 days to get it posted. Because we don't work in a vacuum and we don't have our own warning and our own annual report, we are a little bit at the whim of the municipalities because they have their own internal timelines on when they want us to ship our information to them so that they can get the annual reports done. I think if we got it to them by next Wednesday, they'd probably be okay. They're already kind of asking us what the tax rate might look like. So what we were hoping is that you could approve the budget today, and that amount is what I was showing you, the $24,073,218. That includes the capital fund. If you're good with that, then you can approve the warning, which I gave a hard copy to Libby. and I can show it, I have it on my computer, so I can show you what those articles look like. I think I sent it to you as well. The third bullet here, authorize minor changes. What that's about is, if in the next day I get another equalized pupil count that's frozen and it's off a little bit from what I have in here, the wording on the articles talks not only about what the budget is, but it says, and your projected spending per pupil is X, which is an increase or decrease of whatever percent from last year. The budget number won't change, but that spending per pupil will change if the equalized pupil count changes. So I would also hope that the board would maybe authorize Jim to sign an updated warning if the pupil count changes a little bit, and I have to tweak those spending per pupil numbers and percentages on the article language. That way you don't have to meet again. If you authorize him to do that, then he can do it and we can send it off to the municipalities. So I'll let you take those actions in one moment, and then the last thing is just thoughts on the informational hearing. If you can think about how you want that to look, whether you want it to look a lot like the slides that we did for the public forum. If you have any feedback on what you want those slides to look like, how many slides you want, then we can start working on what that will look like for you. So at this point, I'll turn it over to questions, and then if you feel it's appropriate to make motions on some of these things.
So let's do questions for Grant on his presentation, and then we can move to discussion. So any questions for Grant? Great. So open up to discussion on whether to approve, whether to ask for anything additional.
Has the city decided on its tax rate, on its budget?
They're arguing, last time I heard.
It's, the last I heard, it was pretty similar, between 2.5% and 3% increase.
Okay.
So last time we met, we weren't sure about a few factors, and we did have Nathan pleading with us to consider increasing resources. I think that in the course of the merger process, we projected / promised that would help stabilize our spending. And I think it's important that we keep the trust of the voters by delivering on that. And I think that this budget does deliver on that. This is a really pretty stable situation we have here. We're getting a lot of value for a small increase, I think. I do hear where Libby has said we need more resources in a few areas, particularly to address, challenging behavioral issues, social supports, and so forth. But it also sounds like you're not quite ready to propose specifics in that regard.
Except for the coordinator.
Except for what you have already.
To help us plan it, yeah.
So
to make it thoughtful.
My inclination would be to follow the lead of the administration and look to next year to make those
Shifts.
Yeah, improvements, and stick with this for this year. It's my thought.
I agree, and this is the year of paying more on the bond. So it's good to keep it here.
Andrew?
Quick question for clarification. The 87K that we were talking about initially, that is not in here either, correct? The 87,000 in fund balance, that was in the first
Correct.
budget or two. That's
The
not.
fund balance revenue is not a revenue source in the budget. We took it out.
So if we wanted to do something ambitious next year in the face of the incentive going away and we had another sizable fund balance, which hopefully we do, there may be an opportunity to help with a transition there as well.
Yep.
Yeah, from time to time, I come back with Libby and ask for adjustments to fund balance. And what that means is, you've got a fund balance that's this large number, and then I will ask you to commit certain
Right.
pieces of it for certain things. As a matter of fact, at your next board meeting, I'm probably going to come back and ask for an adjustment, although this one is just to clean things up. In some places, we ended up, when all the dust settled, 17 cents in the hole, or 18 cents extra, or 1,000 here and 1,000 there. So I want to come back and just say, I don't want to change the committed fund balance amount. I just want to have you approve that I'm going to zero out some things and clean it up so we only have a handful of committed projects that we're tracking. But at any time, we could come in and say, we would like to commit X number of dollars for this thing. And I would much rather know the specifics of what it is we're asking for, because you don't want to ask for something, get that resource, use it inappropriately for a while, and then try to fix it. It's much better to make sure you know how you want to use that resource and then get it.
Right.
I'm really confident that the administration is taking a very careful look at where we have needs in the system and thinking about what resources we need to put to those needs. And in fact, although we're not going to talk about it tonight, the entry plan from the superintendent really just confirmed that a lot of really hard work has already been done, and that hard work is continuing to figure out what needs the district has. So I want to thank them for that and echo what Michelle said, that without the administration having had the time to do that work already and time to make those thoughtful decisions, that I'm comfortable with the budget and very open to that ongoing discussion over the coming months about what we need and what is appropriate in the budget next year, so that we can explain to voters when we figure out that plan, we can explain it and sell it and show why it will benefit our kids when we fully understand it. Thank you both and the rest of the team for the work on the budget.
Tina.
I also, since we're still in construction, like the idea that we have a fund balance. Because you never know what's going to happen in construction, and that makes me feel better at this point.
Well, looking at the capital plan, we're going to be in construction for a long time.
Yes.
For the foreseeable future.
Maybe not as big as.
Steve.
Yeah, I'm kind of being persuaded by Michelle and Bridget in terms of the arguments. When I see a numbers that's coming in pretty low, and if we look at public schools as a whole as having come out of some deep austerity times, and sort of a sense of, we have to count every single pencil we spend in schools. There's a real starvation of public education in general. So there's sort of this political backdrop that we have to judge things against. And I don't want to lose track of that we have a hole to dig out of. And sometimes we've set our own expectations a little low for what we think our public schools could be. That's the bigger picture. That's the macro, right? On the micro level, I think what we're seeing are the things you guys just pointed out. One is that we have a commitment to our taxpayers to repeatedly earn trust. And we do that every year. And we have generous communities who really support public education, and we don't ever want to take that for granted. We do want to honor the values of this community, though, which are do more with public education. That is a value of the community, and they're willing to spend for it. They see the austerity of public education in America, and they don't like it. And so they want us to do the most the school can do. So I think we have to be aware that we're earning that trust in both directions. But then the other piece on the micro level is this issue. We have a new administration, and they are getting things organized. They're digging out of a different kind of hole, and really making sure that every single thing we do is well thought through. And I think we need to buy them a little more time. And so I like this attitude. I just want to be careful not to lose that bigger picture, that momentum that I think we all value, which is let's make Montpelier-Roxbury Public Schools a model for what a public school can be, and thank God we have this equity rudder in the middle of it, because that's what we use to make these decisions. So I'm willing to be less of a pain in the butt this year on not spending enough, because I really feel like we're on a good course, and I think that if we can just wait one more year, we can maybe have the buffet in front of us a little smarter set up, for what we actually want to do and why. So.
I'm going to use your equity rudder. I'll give you credit, Steve, but I like that.
Other comments? Questions?
I move that we adopt the budget.
Yeah, I actually want to make a clarifying before we do that. We have a budget and we have a capital plan. They're two separate items, so we need to.
No, I think if you have a motion to approve the budget at $24,073,218, that would be
includes
fine,
the
because you're gonna
capital fund.
approve the warning that breaks them out.
Okay.
with separate dollar amounts, so I think that's.
Why don't, what we have a suggestion that whoever proposes that makes clear in their motion that it includes the capital plan? Just
I move that we
being ultra
approve a
precise.
budget of $24,073,218, which includes $260,000 deposited into our new capital fund.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, thank you for the great work, and I want to echo everything that was said. I think this is.
Do we need to make a motion that you can approve any minor changes or changes?
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
let's do that.
Does
we have to
anybody need
approve the
see
warning, right?
or are you comfortable with what I sent?
I
The
think
language in there, most of that language is by statute that you have to have it. The two budget ones are very much by statute.
I think that we cannot repeat too many times, and we should keep repeating it many, many times between now and March, that although we just talked about approving a budget of 24 million, that includes the capital
Yes.
fund, it is going to be two separate votes on the ballot, and people will see two separate things, but they should know that the 2.8% tax rate increase that we're talking about includes both of those things. So it's not 2.8% plus another 260,000. That 2.8 includes both.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was going to say, and I really think I don't know if now's a good time, but this is what I wanted to talk about in advance of the warning, is how do we want to go about communicating that exact message? Because I can see people getting confused, going to the polls and saying, wait, is this 260,000 included in this figure? Are they trying to pull something? And we need to be really clear with people that we are presenting this in a very transparent way. Yeah, right. That's not the good one.
I think that's important on your March 4th. You know as well as I do that once it's here, it'll be no problem. But this is the first year we've done this, and people have to know that this will come up every year and what it's for and the explanation of that, because we haven't done it before.
And it was done differently last year.
One suggestion I have is that the school board, or the school district is now doing a page in the bridge every month. And so the school board is more than welcome to have part of that page. And I think right before, the February issue will be right before town meeting, because it's the second issue of the bridge every month. So that might be a spot to
explain,
To
right? We have
explain
to
it
stay
again.
on that line of explaining only, right?
Yep. I'm happy to work with someone on that.
Yep.
If we wanted that.
Just as
message.
another public place that I know goes out to a lot of people.
And I think people have to understand what that's for. It may seem self-evident, but it isn't always.
Yep.
That's what I said. Once they understand it, then people are usually fine with it, but they have to understand.
Right.
I'm not sure we even said tonight why it's separate, which is so that the money can roll over from year to year and continue to be used
Yeah, so that
for
we
capital
should say
improvements.
again and again, as Michelle said.
Yeah.
And there's also one other aspect of the annual report, if you, like Montpelier's annual report, when you get to the school section, there's just some charts, no real descriptions, just some charts. There's a superintendent's report that leads up to it. And then there's like our 48-page audit. This year, just so you know, I'm only gonna send them the management discussion and analysis, which is like 7 or 8 pages, instead of the full audit. And in the package where we send them the charts, instead of just sending that tax rate chart, I'm gonna put like a budget overview and put some words about what the budget includes and some things like that. So I just took a note to go back and
You
look at what
put
I
that in
started
there.
drafting to make sure I say it includes the fund, the capital fund, maybe a little bit about what the capital
Yeah.
fund is, so.
So I think the draft did that.
No, so I just took a note to do that. and we'll
You,
make sure.
you could even include your chart that you have shown us that shows the projects that are assigned to those funds for the next 5 or 10 years. I don't know how long you guys have that set out.
That's what I was gonna say, an explanation that says this will now be an ongoing thing, how it operates, why it operates, and that it's ongoing. So it's not just this year we'll ask for a capital fund. Every year you put a little bit in, and it's the nuts and bolts of running the business.
Yeah, I think in addition to the bridge and other things, we could write some op-eds and do some social media. And the bridge usually does a piece of the budget, doesn't it?
The bridge, is that coming out this, that coming out in the latest
maybe
bridge?
We can reach out to Steve Mill. Yeah, they usually do.
No, both of them interviewed us.
Yeah.
For,
I think they do one closer
Yeah,
to
I know, I feel
the
like that was a long
It
time
just,
ago. Did that come
it
out?
just came out, the end of last week, I think,
Yeah.
the current issue.
I haven't looked at it. But they interviewed us a while ago.
The timing, it actually worked out pretty well, because I think whenever we were talking, we were estimating the tax rate might go up like 5 cents, and then it went up way more than that, but now we're back down to about 5 cents, so.
Yes.
No harm.
We have two more actions, approve the warning and authorize minor changes. Do we have a motion to approve the warning?
Move that we approve the warning for the 2019 annual meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then authorize minor changes. Do we want to define minor?
So the minor changes I'm envisioning is not to the budget. You approve the budget, I can't change the budget.
Yeah.
But if the equalized pupil count ends up dropping by a 0.2 or something like that, since the warning talks about the cost per pupil in the language and it has to, it might be enough that it might change that a little bit, and it might change the percentage increase from last year. So I may need to tweak those little, that
The numbers?
sentence in each one of those 2 articles. And it's not really worth having to have everybody come back and reapprove it.
Yeah.
So if it's something just like that, and that's all I'm talking about, if it's a minor thing like those little factors and percentages, if you're okay with that, then we can just ask Jim to come in and sign an updated version.
Equalized pupil and there's 2 numbers in there that we have to.
It's 2 numbers, but they're both related to equalized
Sure,
pupil.
but it'll still be, okay, so we could say authorized to sign varying up to 1 equalized pupil and the resulting change in whatever results from that, something like that, so give him honestly, it's gonna not go more than 1 pupil, is it?
It could. I mean, we're at 1230.
You should give us some guardrails, is all I'm saying. So-
Yeah, so.
I think we talked before that it's like maybe 7 equalized pupils ends up being a penny on the tax rate, which I would say
Okay.
that's significant. So maybe it's up to 5 or up to 7.
Okay.
Doesn't matter, as long as we pick a number that doesn't freak us out any time.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
well, that doesn't freak me out either.
So maybe it's to authorize the board chair to sign an amended warning if the equalized pupil count changes by 7 or less.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
So moved.
Good to me.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Again, great work. I think, as everyone.
Great work.
Yeah.
Great,
Well,
great, great work.
Yes, but I think there are some exciting things to build on in here, and I think the groundwork to really start investing strategically in excellence is there.
You're so generous, Steve.
That's how great it is, though. You don't work till.
I'll go to Union and test the water.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you,
Thanks.
guys.
Oh.
So we're actually relatively on schedule, but a little ahead.
Jim, one more thing before
Good
we
job,
start.
Jim.
Remember, you also did the unified charter of accounts during all this, right?
He's
working on it.
That's in the process.
I mean, it's
And he
like-
drives a school bus to Roxbury.
Yes, whenever we build
Yes.
the
Yes.
budget, we use the old codes and then decided to put in new codes so that whenever the principals get the budget, they'll be able to understand, oh, this new code is what the
So
old
it
fiscal
actually
code
kicks
is.
in at the beginning of the next fiscal year?
July 1st is when it kicks in, and the bigger concern is the whole new finance system that we have to
Sure.
also bring on, which is what.
But the budget is in line with the new accounts?
Yes.
Hey, Grant. Grant.
Yes.
We still,
I know you're stressed over that.
Sorry, Jim.
No worries. So we are pretty much on pace. Policy reading. First reading of equity policy. We have the one that was distributed by Olivia as part of the package that the policy committee worked on with input, my understanding is from the Racial Justice Alliance, and I think some others. And then we have the suggested changes.
It's the same thing, but when Tracy
has it?
copied it, it didn't come out with a red.
Red, okay.
And so Lisa noticed that and said, we need to see what the students suggested. So that's why.
Okay.
So you could ignore the one in the packet, just look at the one I gave you today.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, except you can see the red. Steve, did you get one?
So.
Do you have an extra?
Go ahead,
We'll
Jim.
share.
Yes.
We're good, we're good, we're gonna share.
So, discussion, suggestion, changes on the policy. I thought it was very well done. On one typo,
One
but.
small
Yeah,
addition
some couple typos.
to suggest.
Sure.
On the list of bases for discrimination, race, color, religion, creed, national origin, ethnicity, marital status, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic background, or disability, I would add family composition.
Okay.
In that I just heard of a bias incident related to that this week. So.
it's a good suggestion.
Yeah, that was a good suggestion. Typo in the last sentence is a period and then a semicolon.
Where?
And then includes including right after each
Huh?
other.
Where are we?
Yeah,
Can someone-
this includes including.
At the very end?
Right here. Yeah. There's a period, a semicolon, and then there's includes and including. And
Oh,
it's,
right. See, yeah.
I think
I got that.
including should be taken out. And
It should either be this includes or including.
yeah, and there shouldn't be a period and a semicolon.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can fix that. So I had that.
So it might actually be best if it just said or disability, comma, including the consequences.
One question
It's a
in
chunky
that
sentence, though.
section where it says that we'll provide education and training about hazing, harassment, and bullying, and then particularly with regard to this long list of people. But it seems like that might be tricky because hazing, harassment, and bullying are so specifically defined, and the classes of people that they apply to are also legally defined. I
That
don't know if
is
we
a very good
can just
point.
include everybody.
I
Right.
talked about that with the students.
Okay.
We actually talked at length about that very thing. And I think we ended at the point where they said, we want to put it in. I said, go for it. The board will discuss it. So
I mean, I completely sympathize with wanting to protect everyone, but I don't know if we get ourselves into weird territory if we expand those protections. I don't know.
Are we expanding them? I mean, how much do they align?
In the statutes, I assume.
Yes.
Right, well, certainly the hazing, harassment, and
Yeah.
bullying policy has the language from the statute that has protected classes.
And I gave them that policy, and I gave it to them so they could read it.
Does it
Yeah,
say
it's just-
socioeconomic background in that policy? In those?
I'd have to check on that
I
one.
don't think
I
so.
don't think so.
This list
And that was
definitely.
one of their
Right.
concerns, so I see why they put it in, but I agree with Michelle, it's legally, you're gonna do what the law.
Well, maybe there's some room here.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's okay to expand it
Yeah.
at the district level. We're not
Okay.
imposing our expansion onto the rest of the state
That's
or
right.
anything like that.
So maybe but what I'm thinking is it's a new sentence.
Right.
It's not in with the first one, the district will regularly provide education and training about hazing, harassment, and bullying, period, then make a new sentence that says something about expanding.
I'm just concerned that
yes, expansion is great, but these terms, hazing, harassment, and bullying, are reserved in statute for specific things. And if we start to redefine them, I'm concerned that we are creating this sort of overlapping area that when it comes to enforcement or liability for the district, what have we done? And I mean, honestly, Bridget, you probably could pull this out really quickly to make a determination on that, but I would be nervous about the liability of the district if we start to expand and we name it the same thing that the statute names.
Can we get advice on that?
Bridget?
So I like Tina's idea of a different sentence, and what I'm looking at is the first sentence of this paragraph is not hazing, harassment, and bullying. It's educating students and staff about the significance of how what they say and do affects other students. And so I think we could probably try to work with the language so that we leave the hazing, harassment, and bullying sentence alone, and then talk about the district, is committed, something that echoes back to the first sentence, is committed to provide students. We just have to work on the wordsmithing.
Well, and it's to the district will educate on the significance of how what they say and do affects other students, and then maybe we could tie it to those categories, and then also add that the district will provide education and training about hazing, harassment, and bullying, which probably would more track for statute, and of course,
Well,
there could be
Do
some
you have it
overlap.
limited to students?
So look at
It affects other students? I mean, I feel like that's
Affects other
limiting that
people?
group. Yeah.
Well, it just affects others.
Harassment, hazing, and bullying, that's fine.
Right.
Those are educational opportunity statutes.
One,
We just made it others.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes.
and Libby, you would know maybe from having
Mhm.
engaged with the students on this, but I know that I heard from a lot of students that they were very frustrated and very disappointed at what they saw as a lack of consequences for what they saw as incidents of this nature that happened last year. And part of that is because you don't get to see the consequences that happen to other students, and they find that very frustrating.
Yes.
But I wonder whether this grew out of that experience, and whether they want to, whether what the students are trying to get at is a stronger reaction from the adults when these things occur.
I think what I almost wish Hope were here so she could characterize it, because I don't want to speak for them in any way. They speak plenty well for themselves. But I would, in answer to that, in my conversations with them, they didn't reference last year in particular, to my memory. That group was just very concerned that we have marginalized groups, and that they feel that just society in general does not give enough credence to the fact that these marginalized groups experience different things than others, and that hazing, harassment, and bullying happens more often to those groups and is less reported and is less taken care of in their eyes. And so they really just wanted to call out the fact that marginalized groups, yes, all kids matter in these kind of policies. In marginalized groups, we have to put more emphasis there. That's what they wanted to emphasize it.
So I have a couple of other things. I was wondering, we have "or" before disability in the last sentence of paragraph 3 and the last sentence of the whole shebang, and I was thinking "and" "or"
You're right.
because they're not all independent of each other.
You're right.
Can I be my wonky like Bill Sapphire, or implies and?
And is less like legalese.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Okay,
And or is totally unnecessary, or implies and.
I didn't know that.
That's good to know.
Okay.
You just saved me 4 characters.
I don't know if Strunk and White taught me that.
I think and/or is just an abomination that lawyers
I
invented.
agree. Yeah, I mean, and maybe.
But I know what you're getting at.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Something else that's first of all, this is a great. I think that this is a great document. I don't know exactly how this came to fruition. How did this come to fruition? General question.
A lot of drafts.
There were a lot of drafts.
Yeah. It's the
Were done,
policy
and the
committee?
student- Well, did we
It
start
was-
with something from the
We
students?
started with the very initial
from the
draft
students.
from the
So,
students. And
really,
we had to kind
they're-
of rein way in.
That's
and
why
then-
it's a-
Yeah, they brought it to a meeting, didn't they?
Structure it.
Yeah.
Actually, Libby, I'm curious, listening to Michelle's comments and thinking about the term that Hope used in her presentation tonight, restorative justice, how did RGA respond to not having that term in the policy?
We had long conversations about the difference between policy and procedure. And that in policy, the board does not put
Specific.
mandated programming.
Procedures.
Yeah, which is what restorative justice is. You know, I pointed out that there are many different philosophies, thoughts, programs around discipline, relationship building, that kind of thing. Restorative justice is one of them. And so you don't put that kind of language in policy. And we went around in circles around that for a long time until one of them finally said, well, I don't care about this policy, let's talk about procedure. So I said, we'll get there once we get the
Good
policy.
insight,
Yeah.
So I have a couple of other questions, and I just wanted to float them to the board. It says the district will counteract. I was wondering if we wanted to phrase this in a way that kind of charged the district with counteracting, because if the district isn't counteracting, then
Where are you?
Where are you?
Oh, sorry. It says, third paragraph, the district will counteract the present and historical impact of bias. I was wondering, the district must counteract, the district is responsible for counteracting. Maybe we want it to be more of a visionary statement, but if the district isn't doing that and we want to hold the district accountable, this language isn't as helpful, I was thinking. Maybe you don't feel that way, maybe it's.
Because it sounds like it's always like in the future.
Yeah, it's like the district is going to do this thing. But what if the district isn't doing this, and we're the board, and we're saying, but it says the district will, is that enough? I was just.
When Libby gives us a report, she'll tell us we're not doing it, we better do it.
I think a lot of our policies are phrased as the superintendent will.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a big
Well,
That's
see,
a-
they used to
that's a-
all say shall, but then Bridget
Yeah.
told us that was
Ambiguous. and
lame.
Unclear.
And that we should use will instead of shall.
We could say must.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
The
I was
district
just
must
floating.
counteract.
Mhm.
I struggle with the tense in these things because it's just that point. Is it aspirational?
Right, and that's
or
what I
is
wasn't
it
certain. I wasn't
Mhm.
saying it should be this
Directional?
way. I wasn't certain reading it, and that was one of the things that I was thinking, how do we use this to hold ourselves and our district accountable?
So, in the same vein, here, that was in parentheses, and it says possible alternative superintendent will develop. And I was trying to figure out, where is that different? Where is it that the superintendent develops or the board will? I mean, you could change any of these. I'm asking, I didn't know. When I
Right.
got to that, I thought, okay, what, you know.
I could definitely speak to that, but I didn't want to leave Andrew's point until I had some sense of the
Yeah.
about
Thinking it was the
about this
same
will
kind of thing, yeah.
or must
Okay.
or. Oh, you're saying that's the same thing because that's the district will.
Well, I'm trying to figure that out, of the will, the who will, the superintendent will, the district will, the board will?
Well, that's why that one has an alternative, which is something that the board, we should discuss tonight
Oh,
and figure out where the board wants to land on that.
Because we say that
But,
the district must take affirmative steps in the paragraph before. I think there was something about this that struck me as, should it be must, should it be something else?
Well, yeah,
I'm
and I'm
fine
trying to,
with it
I
saying
think
must.
with that sentence, I mean, must is what we're trying to get at. I think maybe it came out as will because it seems like something that is, we're not gonna adopt the policy and that's gonna happen
It seems
tomorrow.
really big.
Unlike the superintendent must adopt procedures,
So that's a good point. So will is a
It's-
little more visionary. I just wanted to pose it to the board.
A little more.
Yeah.
can I weigh in?
Yeah.
I like the will, because it's gonna take time to get to this policy. Like, we're gonna have to do a lot of work in many different ways, and I'm excited to do that work, and my team's excited to do that work. When it says must, it welcomes the shame on you because you have not done that yet. Like, this.
That's a good point.
This is not easy work right
Especially
here.
for the superintendent.
We're combating
Yeah.
years upon years upon years of unequal treatment. So I think that I like the language of
I
will.
mean, we're combating something that has not been solved by any institution ever.
Thank you. Yeah, that's better. That's a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we don't get there quickly, then
We might not be alone.
we're gonna work our hardest to do it.
On the very last paragraph, can we just break that out into a bunch of sentences?
Yeah, it's
really
be reworded.
Yeah.
Thank
Buddy.
you. This is the third paragraph of the intro?
No,
Yeah, it's the last paragraph. We kind of discussed earlier about.
Oh, right,
breaking
yeah,
it
yeah,
down.
just needs to-
The policy committee can.
The same way.
And then
And
can I
I'm-
go
do
back?
that.
I feel like similarly, the policy review section right under 2.0 board expectations could use some wordsmithing also. It doesn't read terribly well. Don't need to change content necessarily, but. So we can focus on the final paragraph.
Doesn't disproportionate access and outcomes mean the achievement? I mean, disproportionate outcomes is the same thing as the achievement gap.
I agree, that's what it needs to be reined in.
Won't we do that?
Yeah, it's redundant.
We do that.
Also, number 4 is just like one big run-on sentence.
Through a certain lens.
I don't know if we've done this historically well.
I think
Ryan,
content's
to go to your policy review, my question would be, does that mean that in monitoring reports, the superintendent's monitoring reports will have an additional piece to it whenever a policy is monitored, that there's like an equity lens? Is that what that paragraph tries to get at?
You know, it's not. That's a really interesting point. We must have said that actually wouldn't be a good thing.
I think the
I
impetus
think
is on the
read it that
board.
way.
Yeah, the thought of this was that this section was on the board.
Right, the board has to claim responsibility for having its own evaluation of itself, and
Sorry, I misread.
The superintendent is above there reporting to the board on the district's compliance with this
Right,
policy.
which is in every
Which is in every
policy.
policy.
I
Yep,
was
okay.
excited
So this is like
that
an
we'll
overview of-
annually
yeah.
have professional development.
Um, So, Ryan, you were saying we need to wordsmith policy review.
this is just
For-
that, to consider their effect on perpetuating inequities or contributing to disproportionate access and outcomes and the achievement gap. It's those three statements, disproportionate access, outcomes, and achievement gap are all kind of related, and it doesn't,
Yeah, what's
it's
the
a bit clunky in the way it's worded right now.
Could we take out outcomes if we want to say achievement gap?
Probably, because it
I mean,
applies the same thing.
It's the same thing.
It seems like the same. I don't know. I kind of preferred outcomes because it's more
Bigger.
general, bigger
Rather than
picture than the
achievement
achievement
gap.
gap.
Thinking about
I think it was fine the way it was, but I can understand the students wanting to explicitly reference the achievement gap. But I think disproportionate outcomes includes the
Mhm.
achievement gap.
It includes
Could
other
you
things.
say that? Could you say including the achievement gap instead of and the achievement gap?
Yeah.
Just so it's
Mhm.
clear that it's in there? That would work.
And then I didn't want to lose Tina's point about the recruitment and hiring section. It's the main text in there, not the alternative, is very procedurally written. And I think that's why the committee left in this alternative for the board to consider how far in this policy we wanted to go down the procedural road versus just directing the superintendent to do it.
This is another place that I think we've got work to do, and that's the issue of the superintendent's gonna do that, the board's not gonna do that. That's my first thought.
This particular work would definitely fall under the superintendent's role.
I
Yeah.
can't hear anything down there.
Speak
We
up.
can't hear a word you're
Sorry.
saying at that end of the table.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I was saying under this recruitment and hiring, that this is work the superintendent's gonna do, so this possible alternative makes sense to me that it's an assignment to the superintendent. The board is not going to do this.
Yeah.
Well, it says the district. Wouldn't that be the superintendent?
It's ambiguous.
The
If
district
we-
is the board and superintendent together.
Performance of the district is the performance of the superintendent. Performance of the superintendent is the performance of the district.
Isn't
That's the old policy. I don't
It's
know
the
if
old policy, yeah.
We don't have that policy anymore.
Well, and we are
Right.
accountable for all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just to be
Yeah.
clear, I think if we took the alternative, it would end with the first sentence. The superintendent will develop recruitment and hiring procedures to ensure that the district follows best practices to ensure a diverse and
Yeah.
inclusive applicant pool and bias-free hiring practices, period. Like, that would be the end of it. But that would take out the part where we're affirmatively including some things about training and resources.
It would take that part out.
It would take that part out because it would become the superintendent's job
I'd write a
to figure
procedure.
out what the best practices are and put it in the procedure.
Your new HR coordinator would, and you'd approve.
I would delegate the
Review it.
responsibilities to a helpful new, fantastic, not gonna have the park agent HR.
Any reactions to which way to go on that one?
I think the alternative makes sense.
You know, comfortable with that?
It does mean you're gonna have to codify procedures though, which can be kind of limiting. But if that's what works.
It can be revised, it's one of those things, as you know more, you do better, right?
True, true. And it will
especially
be open
for-
to revision.
Yeah, especially for something like this,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's bridging new territories for our ever-white Vermont state.
Well,
you
in
know?
HR in general, it changes every year anyway.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So you're up for it.
So it's just a substitute for that first, this is, or does it somehow?
That's what we're doing, just what you said.
No,
A
but
little
I'm
more
just
specifically than the
having a hard
district.
time connecting these, so
Oh.
it starts with that superintendent will develop.
You wanna read it again?
The
What's right?
superintendent will develop recruitment and hiring procedures to ensure that the district follows best practices to ensure a diverse and inclusive applicant pool and bias-free hiring practices, period. And that would be the end of the section.
That's the whole end of the whole paragraph.
Yeah.
That works.
The meat of that is inclusive applicant pool and bias free.
I think.
Ensure to ensure.
Can I say ensure bias-free hiring practice? Absolutely. The diverse and inclusive applicant pool. I can work on procedures to, and we can work to get that to happen and training and all that kind of thing. I don't know if I can ensure a diverse applicant pool because I can't control who applies.
But you're ensuring best
You can.
practices.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
That
You ensure the
You're
practices.
following
Best
best practices
How
that are
about
designed.
aimed at
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Well,
to ensure best
we
practices
want a very
and
high bar on this, because,
yeah.
you know, if we go back to the same thing all school districts in Vermont do all the time, we're not gonna get there.
Right.
Right, we don't, we
Yeah,
recognize that
yeah.
that has to be
So, yeah.
different, yes.
Right.
It's not just school spring stop. It's-
Right.
Certainly.
Right.
So I don't know how we I think ensuring best practices is probably gonna get us there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that.
I mean, it would be great not to have the word ensure.
Well, you could say.
Twice.
You can
in that
ensure the
sentence.
best practices.
Best,
I mean,
to
Yeah.
ensure district
But this
follows
says
best practices
ensure a diverse
to-
and inclusive
for-
applicant pool.
That you
which
cannot
is-
ensure.
Yeah.
right? Especially
Yeah,
in
you-
this.
So to promote a diverse and inclusive, it's ensure best practices and then
Yeah.
to
How
promote
about
a diverse.
for a the district follows best practices for a diverse and inclusive applicant pool.
For recruiting?
Yeah, for recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's really what it
Okay.
is, because
Yeah.
that's what's within our power.
Okay, so then I have for recruiting a diverse and inclusive applicant pool and ensuring bias-free hiring practices.
Good.
Okay, that's got longer. Great.
You have those
And
notes,
I,
Bridget?
I think number 4 just needs to be wordsmithed. I don't think we need to necessarily do that here, but that's all one sentence. And and parts of it don't jibe with each other.
That is a long sentence.
Yeah.
Can I ask for clarification? Bridget, Steve, you probably remember the conversation maybe better than I do. The concerted action by the board will promote and support regional and statewide actions that support the objectives of this policy. Implies that we will do what?
Yeah, I thought people would want to talk about that.
Where are
Glad
you?
you brought it up. Under board expectations. I was thinking of, and we had discussions on the committee about whether it's too broad. It's part of the discussion with the board. What was in my mind, and I won't speak for everyone, was that some of the things we're trying to accomplish can't be done at the district level. And so there's a really important role for trying to make sure that we're not just looking at some of these actions as we do them in Montpelier, but for example, if there's an effort to try to improve recruitment to Vermont to try to really do something about diversity, that's something that you might want to be working with the VSBA, or you might want to be working with other school districts in the region. There's lots of professional development. There's lots of other examples where we would want to be working with other regional and state organizations to try to achieve these objectives. But I think, as we talked about on the policy committee, it could be read as a broader, sort of a commitment to a much broader range of political actions. I don't know. Anyway.
There are opportunities to
Yeah.
join into other initiatives that occur.
Yeah.
We've seen this in other areas.
Mhm.
Well, actually in this area where we've actually, so you want to add us on as an amicus, or whatever. There are opportunities. Sometimes it's reactive, right? It's like it's coming before us, or a board member says, hey, this is going on in the community, should we do this? And I really like this idea of being able to go beyond the work in the district to say that the work of the district connects to other districts and other communities, but I don't think it's a mandate to go to do a ton of work. I think it's just to see it as part of our mission, is to be open to it and to accept opportunities when they arise at a minimum.
And we really are leading on this front. I was talking with my wife, who has developed a student group similar to some of the diversity groups that we have here at Stowe Middle and High School, and I shared this policy with her last night, and she thought this was amazing that the board was proceeding with this, and she thought it was a real we were stepping into a real leadership role.
All right, you guys are on the cutting edge here.
Yeah, and she was saying it would be great if our board adopted this and other boards adopted this, and this could be a model, because it would be really helpful for teachers and students to have this type of support from their boards. So I think putting this in here and reaching out to board members through
the
associations, networks, I think it's a good thing.
I agree.
That's where it's an example, if you have to adopt this, to be consistent with this policy, we would share it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. Right.
And we could do things, through like the VSBA and other things to, establish a leadership role and talk about it.
I'm sure the VSBA would like to see every school have this policy.
They are coming to your next board meeting, so
Maybe they'll give us free
they'll
membership.
hear the second
provided to
reading.
us.
What'd you say?
So maybe they'll give us free membership for a year if we provide them as a.
Look at the work we've saved them.
Look at that.
A model policy.
Are we?
I just wanted to recognize again the leadership role of the students who came to us and have been working on this for so long.
They're fabulous.
They're fabulous. And
It's awesome.
This is an exciting step. Tina?
So while we're recognizing, I'd like to recognize the policy committee who has been working
Yes.
very hard since the merger
Oh,
on all
thanks.
of these, and it was nice in Libby's report to see that
We're in a flow.
we're in a flow and we're where we need to be, and I want to thank those people because they've spent a lot of time.
Definitely.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Prizes all around.
Yeah, no, definitely. This is an exciting step, but it is cutting edge. We need to do a lot, but I think this is a good concrete step after raising the Black Lives Matter flag to show that we're getting serious and we want real change. I think executive session is next. We need to go for two purposes, so. Requisite motions, we need one for contract negotiations and one for personnel.
Motion for contract negotiations. Motion to enter executive session for contract negotiations.
We need to make the
You need to
finding.
do the
I move that
complex
we, I move that we
two-part.
find that discussing contract negotiations in public session would put the board at a disadvantage.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Then I think we can just do one motion to go in for both purposes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I've been up since 4.
I move that the board enter executive session for the purpose of discussing contract negotiations and personnel matters.
You have a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?